Hi there, everyone. My name is Prerak Juthani. I'm a third-year internal medicine resident at Stanford, and today I'm going to talk about what I wish I knew during my intern year. There are several lessons that I think I've learned so far, and again, I'm only 2 years into training, so a lot of this is very naive, but I do think there is some value to be able to reflect on this because I am quite close to intern year, and so I know exactly the types of things I was feeling, and it's not too distant of a memory for me to reflect on them. So with that being said, here are some of the lessons. I'm going to go into each of the lessons as their own slide, and then in the process also tell you what I learned about them. With each slide, I will also include photos from residency to reinforce the fact that while this is a very tough time, you should continue to embrace it. It's a big part of your life. You'll be making memories, you'll be making friends, and more importantly, you'll be able to have a lot of fun. The definition of fun, though, may change over time. So with that being said, let's start with the first lesson, which is, I wish I knew this in my intern year, and it's the fact that it's not necessarily about what you know. Of course, medicine is definitely a very evidence-based field, and a lot of what we do has a lot of evidence behind it. Unfortunately, learning that evidence can be very overwhelming. But as an intern, it actually is not about what you know at all. I think, like with any profession, when you start on day one, there is a very low expectation for you to know exactly how things work. Instead, the goal for you is to get orientated with the profession, and more importantly, orientated with how to navigate it, right? So you may not always know everything, but honestly, no one ever really does. And even by your third, fourth, fifth year of training, you may know the differences between X and Y, but to this day, I still look a ton of things up. And so it's, again, not about what you know, but it's actually more about, do you know where to go to find the answers? And that's what you're going to slowly start learning. By your second and third year, you're not going to necessarily know more, but I do think you're going to know exactly where to go when you don't know the answer. So that's the first lesson that I wish I had known in my intern year. The second one is to always ask questions. Always, always, always ask questions. I actually feel like I embraced this a little bit more readily than I embraced this one. This one I feel like I totally neglected, and I felt like so incompetent because I felt like I did not know enough. But this one I do feel like I leaned into quite a bit, because the more questions you ask, the less likely it is that you will ask that question again. And that also means that you're learning more, right? Every question you have is likely a question that someone else is also going to have. And especially if you're in academia, or especially if you're doing residency in an academic institution, which tends to be most of us because residencies tend to be at academic institutions, you will also help train future interns. You will also help train future second-year residents. And in the process, they may also have the same questions that you have. So when you have those questions, you should ask them, because one, someone else may be able to show you a way to do it that's much faster than the way that you know how to do it. And secondly, when you ask those questions, you're learning. And more importantly, we always should continue to do that even as we progress through training. I still see a lot of attendings who often ask questions to their other attending colleagues. I see a lot of attendings who, when we have a question for nephrology, will physically just call nephrology and say, hey, why did you do this instead of this? Today, I actually just worked with a cardiologist that prescribed flecainide for rhythm control for one of the individuals who went into SVT. And I got to basically talk to him about why he chose flecainide. And the interesting part is even my supervising doctor had the same question. And so we're all learning this together. So ask questions. The third aspect, and the photo I have here is of me with a few of my R2 and R3 colleagues. This is us going out for like a monthly dinner that we usually have once every 2 to 3 months. It's really fun, and it's a way for us to connect outside the hospital, and you'll notice that even when we meet outside of the hospital, sometimes we're still wearing scrubs. The next lesson is the fact that the hospital has feelings. If you watched my previous video, which I think I've published already, it's about lessons I learned during my intern year. And this is kind of in line with the fact that the hospital does have feelings. And I'm a firm believer in the fact that if you emanate negative energy, there are so many things that are going on in the hospital, and the hospital is a confined space. So if you imagine that you put negative energy out there, there's only so many people working in the hospital. And so that negative energy is confined to such a small space that it often finds its way back. I personally feel this sometimes, where if someone is mean to me, or if I feel like man, that person didn't rub me the right way, then I feel kind of annoyed at other people. And the problem with that is that it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Some person who has a bad experience with another person leads to more bad experiences with future people. So with that being said, remember that by being kind in the hospital, you can also have the opposite effect. I've had days in the hospital where I've felt so overwhelmed, but a simple thank you or a simple, "It was amazing to work with you today," really just makes your day that much better, because you know that you're all on one team. And then when I get feedback like that, I feel more likely to pass it on as well to other individuals. So these are some of our these are some of our annual resident dinners that we have with our program director, as well as sometimes our associate program directors. These dinners serve as an informal reminder to me to remind myself that, hey, we're all one team, we're all humans. And even when we're in the hospital and things get very stressful, we have to remember that, because bad energy begets more bad energy, and good energy begets more good energy. Now we just have 3 big additional lessons, and I think each one slowly gets more and more interesting. The next one is the fact that you are good enough. I think this is true in medical school, this is true in residency, and it's true even in early attendinghood. At every step in training, there is always going to be a form of imposter syndrome, because medicine is one of those careers where every level you're expected to know more, and every level you do technically have to know more. And it's somewhat different than other fields, right? Like if you think about tech, if you think about big software engineering companies, a lot of the innovation tends to happen with younger individuals. But in medicine, innovation can't really happen with younger individuals, because there's such a steep learning curve. And before you can even think about how to innovate, you kind of have to address the hierarchy. You have to go through residency, you have to become a junior attending, and then you become a senior attending. And because of that, there's always going to be a form of imposter syndrome. And with that, you have to consistently remind yourself that you are good enough. You've been through high school, you've been through undergrad, you've been through gap years, you've been through medical school, you've been through now intern year. And with each of those, you have gone through challenges that I'm sure at some point you thought were insurmountable, and yet you overcame them. And residency is going to be no different. There will be things that you've never seen before, and there will be days that are absolutely intolerable, but you've been through things like this, and you will be stronger because of it. Never doubt that you belong, and always remember that we're all going through these things, and every time we go through an unfamiliar experience, it's mostly just a good learning experience for us to have going forward. Here's a great picture before I even started residency. This is in my intern year, and it's basically just all of us going on a hike before we had even started any medicine at all. And it's just a crazy thing to reflect on, because now we're almost all third years, and we just had to, when we met on this hike, I just remember feeling so grossly underprepared for residency. And to this day, I still feel not perfectly prepared, but it was all okay, and it worked out. The second to last one, it gets better. This is actually something I wish I knew, and I think people kept telling me, but I didn't believe them. And the reason I have does it, though, in parentheses, is because it gets better in a lot of different ways. After you're done with your intern year, you will feel a lot more comfortable in your ability to be okay in the hospital. That doesn't mean that you'll know all the answers. You'll just feel more comfortable in an environment that right now should probably feel very uncomfortable. And rightfully so, right? People come to the hospital when they're sick, and they often trust us in some of the most vulnerable points in their life. And that can be very overwhelming. But by the end of intern year, you're going to feel comfortable with that feeling. You're going to be comfortable with that pressure. And even though your second and third and fourth year, you will have more responsibility, because a lot more of the weight is going to fall on your shoulders, you're going to have to do less intense work. You won't have to write as many notes. You won't have to, be able to do as much that you're doing right now. As an intern, the real goal is for you to do a lot more direct care. And so you'll see that by second year, you take care of more patients, but you don't write as many notes. And by third year, you're doing essentially what an attending might do. And notice that this is more specific for internal medicine residency, but it's relatively similar across most specialties. As an intern, you do a lot of the grunt work. As a second year, you graduate up. You're still doing more grunt work, but you're supposed to be owning it, like zoning in on your clinical skills and really thinking about how and why am I making the decisions I'm making. And then as you get to third, fourth, fifth, and sixth year, you're supposed to really start reaching the peak of what is the up-to-date evidence on this? What is the biggest clinical guideline on this? How are we treating X, Y, and Z? Those sorts of things. And last one. This one actually, is very interesting. I wish someone told me that crying does help. And I have cried several times during residency. And the reason why I say this is not to make it seem like residency is horrible and everyone should cry. It's to remind yourself that you are going through go through so many experiences that oftentimes take a lot of time to unpack, and we don't have that time sometimes in residency. You're going to see people pass away. You're going to see people go through things. You might see people who give you feelings of other people in your life. Maybe someone reminds you of your brother or sister or mom or dad, and they go through a very tough outcome. Or you yourself often are going through situations that can be very challenging. And because you have such little time in residency, you often don't get time to deal with those emotions. And I would encourage you to try to do that, because emotions are good. And as we kind of come to terms with what resonated with us and come to coping, it reminds us of what it means to be human. And so here's another photo of me and my family. Make time for your family, make time for other people in your family, and more importantly, make time for your emotions. So with that being said, I hope you all enjoyed this video. It's just a hodgepodge of some of the things I wish I knew. It's to reinforce whatever you're going through right now is likely something that a lot of other people are going through. And I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please drop a like, comment, share, subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.